Hello.
Hi, how are you? Can we talk English?
Yeah,
Is
we
it
can talk in English.
okay? Good, because it's so much easier for me, and I assume it's probably easier for you too.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Before we begin, I was wondering if it is okay with you if I publish this on YouTube for
Yeah,
educational purposes.
yeah, sure.
Okay.
I
Thank
wish
you.
I looked better for it, but yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So, if at any time you feel uncomfortable or sensitive, just let me know and we can
Yeah,
finish
sure.
it.
Yeah.
So, to start off, could you please tell me a bit about yourself?
Well, I mean, my name is Maya, and I'm originally from Bosnia. And when I was in Bosnia, when I was 16, I was injured, and where I was sitting outside when the bomb exploded, killed all five of my friends. I was eventually evacuated to U.S. Army Hospital in Frankfurt, Germany, and then from there to U.S. Army Hospital. Well, actually, Cumberland Memorial Hospital in United States because I needed so much treatment,
Yeah.
and it's sort of a little bit about me, I guess.
So it's known that Bosnia used to be part of Yugoslavia. So could you explain your life before and leading up to the war that occurred?
Well, Bosnia was part of Yugoslavia, and Yugoslavia in itself, at least before war, and from what I know and what I experienced, was really a very beautiful, ideal place to live. When it came to, let's say, nature, we had oceans, we had mountains, we had fields, we had, just absolutely beautiful, stunning lakes, stunning nature preserves, all kinds of stuff that is located. Location itself is practically in Central Europe, right across from Italy. So location-wise, it was beautiful and very convenient. Um, Growing up on Adriatic Sea was amazing. Politically, Yugoslavia was somewhat unique in a sense that it did not subscribe to any specific political system. And what I mean by that, it while it had some communism parts in it, it wasn't a communist country. What we, for example, think of as in China today. Communism was in the sense where that, a lot of the things like, the ocean front belonged to the country and no one could purchase it. There was a lot of national preserves and things like that. Also, at the same time, it was socialist country, and what I mean by that, it was you could have free education, free medicine, and have a lot of social services that allowed people at least basic living. So, for example, if your parents worked for government or any company, they would be provided free from the government an apartment where they could live, and it would be based on the size of their family. And then thirdly, it was also a capitalist country. And what I mean by that is that, hey, if you didn't want to work for a company, if you didn't want to work for a government, you wanted to start your own, you could have private enterprise, you could own your own land, you could own your own houses, and you were basically free to do as you wish. So in that way, Yugoslavia is a combination of all those systems that were balanced, and it took the best out of each of them, and it kind of was combined into one thing together.
Yeah. So what was your personal experience in the war? I know that you ended up in the hospitals, but could you go more in depth with your story?
Sure. So I was, we had it. I'm originally from Mostar, so I don't know if you know where that is, but
Yeah.
Mostar basically had two wars, right? The first thing to note is that Mostar is located in on the river. It's a town on the river, and it's surrounded by mountains. So we had two wars. The first war was with when a Serbian army came in, and they came in from the east, and they came in and basically killed and raped and burned everything that was on that side because they wanted to occupy that side. My family and I, we had an apartment where we lived. It was on that left side where they came. During that time, I was a refugee, and I missed that completely. My father stayed behind because men weren't allowed to leave, but he was able to save himself by swimming across the river to the other side. Eventually, at some point, Serbian army receded to the mountains and left behind basically everything that was destroyed, but at least we could start going back to live there. The shooting had stopped. So we came back from being refugees. We came back to Mostar. We lived on the right side. But what we would do, because the left side had no electricity and no water, and nothing else, like it was just a bunch of shells of buildings, we would get up in the morning. We would walk across the bridges to the left side. We would work all day, try to clean up and fix everything. And at night, we would walk back to the other apartment. But on May 9th, Croatia decided that they wanted to take over the entire Mostar. And what they did is they herded about 60,000 civilians across the bridges to that left side where there was nothing. And then they bombed all the bridges, and then they started bombing us, right? And that's during that time is when I was injured. I was sitting with 5 of my friends in front of our apartment building when the bomb exploded about 5, 6 feet from me, killing all 5 of my friends, and I was severely injured. Because there was nothing on the left side, during the time, what we did is we made a makeshift hospital in the basement of one of the buildings, and I was taken to that basement. And because there's no medications, I had an infection in my body, so the only way to fight the infection was basically to cut the infected flesh off and keep the wounds clean. My leg had to be amputated without anesthesia. I mean, it was just a horrible, horrible time.
Yeah. So,
If you have
um,
questions, please feel free.
yeah. So you said that you went from Frankfurt to America. How were they able to, for one, get you into Frankfurt and then move you to America as well?
So while I was there in that makeshift hospital, we had no contact with anybody on the outside, right?
Mhm.
But 2 months later, I was literally on the brink of death when this lady named Sally Becker, she was an artist in England, and she was watching news one day in London and basically said, you know what? My art is not selling. I'm going to go and try to help some people. She ended up going first to refugee camps to help them learn how to paint and do paint therapy. However, she heard about Mostar, and she heard about left side of Mostar, and that we were all stuck there. And she herself she's Jewish, and she was worried that there were Jews stuck on that side. So she wanted to get them out. So she somehow got permission to go in there and rescue injured children. But it's because when she got there, she realized there was no Jews there, but there were injured children. So she got permission to rescue 3 injured children. Um, I was one of the kids. She showed up at that time. I didn't speak any English. So she showed up with an interpreter at my bedside, and she said, I got a permission to rescue 3 injured children out. You're one of the candidates if you want to go. We're leaving in 20 minutes. So 20 minutes later, I was on a stretcher. We went through the enemy territory with the ambulances and got out. From there, I was lifted by U.S. Army helicopter to like a U.S. Army makeshift hospital in Zagreb,
Mhm.
Croatia. And then from there, they have determined, due to all the surgeries that I had, that my injuries needed a lot more attention. So they transferred me to Frankfurt, Germany, U.S. Army Hospital. I was there for a few months getting daily surgeries. But there, they also determined that my injuries were still really complex and I needed to be transferred to United States. But they didn't know how. So what happened was, because our story was in the news, like when I got rescued, we were the first kids we were the first people, first kids, first anybody that got out of that area. So it was covered by a lot of media. Well, a group in the United States called Veterans for Peace, they had organized a little small chapter in Cumberland, Maryland, and they read about me in the paper, and they said, hey, we'd like to take in this little girl and help her. So they arranged with Sally Becker for me to be transferred from Frankfurt, Germany to Memorial Hospital in Cumberland for medical services.
So as you know, the United States and other European countries were offering refugee visas per se. So do you believe that the United States and those Western countries were offering easily accessible asylum to those suffering in the conflict in the Balkans?
Um, well, so I can't, you have to, everything I say, it's going to be my opinion as I have learned it. So I have to qualify that because I was not the expert and I was not the one doing and checking the visas. From what I could tell, like from us personally, it was very difficult to get a visa because they were only giving it to specific couples. For example, couples that were mixed marriage. So if there was a couple who was a Christian and a Muslim family, they were granted visas, or Greek Orthodox and a Muslim family, they were granted visas. But if you were, let's say, combined only Muslim family, then you were not granted visas. You would basically stay there. And it's fascinating to look at that. It's something that you never thought of before. But when you look back at war and what happened, and when you ask yourself, well, why did Croatia, herd 60,000 people onto that one side and then start killing? Why didn't they just take over? Well, to me, now looking back, it's a very strategic move. One way to commit genocide is not just killing, but it's also to disperse people and move them out of the country. And it's also to herd them into the area, kill enough of them. So when few years later you have voting, right? You can say, oh, well, let's vote. Well, now this city actually belongs to Croatians, not Bosnians, right? Well, it does belong to Croatians, not Bosnians, not because it actually should belong there, but it belongs because you kill thousands of Bosnians, exported thousands more, and then imported thousands Croatians, because all of those 60,000 people that were herded to the left side, 60,000 people came from Croatia to take over the apartments and populated the empty stuff on the right side. So now you've actually skewed completely the demographics of one city. So when you say, hey, let's stop the conflict, let's have a vote. Well, vote is not really right and it's not democratic. The genocide has already been committed. See, the problem with genocide, it could be done many different ways, not just actually with a gun. It can be done with very much a political strategy. And at the end of the day, if you want to look at it and be fair, you need to look at it what it was prior to genocide commitment, not after.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Um, Regarding that, so do you believe if the asylum wasn't just limited to mixed marriages, that there would be more justice for survivors, or would you say that would contribute more to the genocide if more left?
I don't know which way it would be contributing. It's hard to tell. The problem that I have with it is that someone outside party, is making already selection who can and can't go. And that doesn't seem right. If you feel that your life is feared and you're fearing your life, from what I understand, is that if you fear your life, you can search for political asylum anywhere in the United States. You can come in and say, hey, I fear for my life for whatever reason. It, to me, shouldn't be defined by, well, here's the check boxes. Now, I do want to point out the flip side of that, that if you open up to everybody, then does that mean everyone is going to come and it's too much? Right? Do they have a place? So that's sort of the flip side of that argument. But even when I do a flip side of that argument, I think to myself, well, people who want to go, you can deny them, but at least everyone has an option who wants to leave, versus those people who actually, like all of these people who were Christian and Greek Orthodox, or as some people are referred to as Serbian Croatian, is if they're all leaving, well, then whoever you're killing is pretty clear. You're killing basically Bosnian Muslims.
Yeah. So regarding the conflict, do you think there would have been any other way to end or at least resolve the conflict going on in that Balkan region that's still pretty much going on today?
I was just gonna say, I mean, I don't know that it has resolved. I think it has resolved in a peace in minds of the media and of the international world, and it looks like it was all tied in a nice little bow and left, but nothing has really been resolved. Quite the opposite. Actually, the situation there is far worse than it was before. Um, I would have thought, just a layperson, I would have thought that a simple thing would be, okay, the war is over now, everybody go home and let the people live where they are. But the reality is Bosnia now has one of the most complex political system in the world, which has, and Bosnia is what's the size of Kentucky. We're not talking about a lot of people. Bosnia has less people than just London alone. So what that means is that you have such a small population of people, such a small territory, and you have the most complex system. Everything is halted and nothing can be done. And for those who think that Bosnia has been saved by this Dayton agreement that has been signed by Bill Clinton, you have to question that, because if you have designated different areas that belong to Serbia and another area that belongs to Croatia, and then this belongs to Bosnia, well, you actually haven't stopped the conflict. You haven't stopped the genocide. What you've done actually is you put a stamp on it. You said, okay, I understand genocide happened and you guys won. Right. So, yeah, there's 20, 30 people that have gone to Hague and they have gotten, an international, crime tribune, and they've gotten their sentences and all that stuff. But the reality remains for those people living there is that the country has been divided, not just attacked by Serbia and Croatia and then people killed, but it has been endorsed by international community, basically saying, yes, you guys lost. Genocide essentially happened, but it lost. But that's not really talked about publicly. Publicly, everybody thinks, oh, Bosnia and a war was there and it's over. But it's not over. It's not over for those people. They're living it every single day.
Yeah. Do you think if there was like a different approach to how the war was handled in the beginning from the get-go, that the Balkans would have ended up in a different situation than they are now, a much better situation?
Well, so here's the thing. I mean, here's the fact that you have to say if the war was handled differently from the get-go. We're in a 21st century. Why are we handling war? Why are there rules that we have for war? Who is making these rules up, and why is it okay? Listen, you can kill people, but here's the rules of the war. We're all these crimes that are committed now is basically for committing for committing crimes in the wrong way, right? So it seems to me that in 21st century, during that time was the 20th century, but in the 20th century, with intelligence that we're supposed to have and all this progress that we have made as humanity, that we should not have war in Europe, period. I mean, that seems unfathomable to me. And now we have war in Ukraine. So why are these wars happening? How is this allowable? How is this okay? And I think there's a different ways to handle things than war. Like it just really does go beyond me that we are so primal and really so behind and so I'm not sure what the word is, but really not quite intellectual, to be able to resolve the conflict and live in the past and try to set in the rules, because that 200 years ago belonged to me, and this is your religion and this is my. I mean, why are we talking about this when there is so much bigger and better things to be conquering and learning about the world?
Another like personal opinion, why do you believe that many of the people in the Balkans, as I even see on social media, they take defense to certain things. Like, for example, when someone will mention Kosovo, Serbia will go ahead and start attacking, or Republika Srpska, or the Herzegovina region, stuff like that.
What do you mean, how, why they take offense? I'm not sure
Like,
that's the question.
in what sense, like, why do you think they take personal offense to that land, to how why basically why are they so defensive about land that most of the time really has not much to do with them,
So
and they
the
create conflicts for generations continuing,
So you're talking about Serbians taking offense that Kosovo does not belong to Serbia. I don't
and
know.
vice versa.
It seems like this is primitive. To me, it seems like some kind of primitive generational issues that have not been taken care of. I mean, it's the way these people. It's like Hitler. It's like Nazis. I mean, the way this mindset has been bred and grown into the people, it's hard to fight. We see a lot of that in the United States too. I mean, why do we still have racism? Why do we have still all these issues that are happening today, even in the United States? This is a mental health issue. In all aspects, in all of humanity. And that's why I wish that we would be focusing more on mental health issues. And I don't mean that people are crazy, they need therapy, but I think in the way mental health issues, that we need love, we need support, we need understanding, and more than anything, we need empathy to try to understand each other, to try to figure out how to live together and work together, because at the end of the day, we're all the same. Like, what are we talking about? These differences don't really matter so much, and they only the craziest things, that all these differences exist only in our minds, in our world. I mean, otherwise they don't typically really exist. Like, the fact that you pray to God doesn't really matter which God you pray to. It's your personal connection with some higher spiritual being, and that should be encouraged no matter what we're doing and how we're doing it, because that is one of the beauties and purposes in life that we have. So to me, these people taking offense to it is no different than a lot of people taking offense that, I don't know, somebody doesn't want to make a gay cake, or somebody, like all this discrimination that we happening even in the United States. It's just it just needs to be understood. These people need to be understood, talked to in a loving and supportive, empathetic way, so they can get through their generational trauma and not keep pushing it from generation to generation to create diversity and adversity for everybody around them.
So if in the Balkans they focus more on healing the generational trauma from the war and the hatred, do you believe that possibly things may settle down a bit and resolve, at least in a more peaceful way?
Absolutely. I think healing and resolving that trauma and resolving the history is important. But I think one crucial thing that has to be mentioned in this, and this is what a lot of people forget, whether it's here in the United States, which is why we have now books being banned in Florida, which is why what happens in Bosnia now is happening. And that is that those who have either committed crimes or committed acts that are shameful are not first willing to take accountability for their actions. In other words, they're gaslighting the victims, right? So Croatia needs to come up and say, you know what we did, it was bad and we shouldn't have done it, but let's shake hands and move on. The first thing to any healing with any victim is finding that is that that person who did the crime, right? To that bully, whoever that is, to actually take accountability for their action, to understand, to be empathetic. Once you have moved past that, then the healing can actually begin. But nowhere can you go in there and say to the victim, let's forget what happened, as though it didn't happen. That is a problem. Just if you take that down, we're talking about nations here, we're talking about American history that I use the example. But if we take down to a person, right? So if you take down that to a woman who has been beaten and raped, right? And she needs to now find some healing and get past that. The first thing that she needs to hear is she needs to feel heard. She needs to feel understood. She needs someone to take accountability, to say, yes, this happened to you, and it was horrible, and it was painful, and it shouldn't have happened to you. And then she can heal. But it's not, she's never going to heal if you say to her, oh, just forget it. It's not a big deal. Let's just pretend it didn't happen. No, she's not going to feel, she's going to grow resentment, and it's just going to grow more. And that's how it is for nations. So nations, now multiply that by millions of people, and you've got lots of angry people, bitter, who are willing to do anything, and they're just fighting back, and they're just angry.
Yeah. I believe you've answered every question that I've had about the whole conflict. I really appreciate the opportunity you gave me and the time.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, anytime. And if you have any more questions, just let me know.
I will. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.